I saw this meme on Facebook, and it was something about things that people say to those of us with Asperger syndrome. And it also characterized different types of people with Asperger syndrome. And that just kind of triggered a thought. Why not make a video about some of the dumb things people say to and about those of us with Asperger's? Now, a lot of people don't even know what it is. But when they do know what it is, it's often a misperception. So we came up with these 10 things. Now, because I tend to talk a lot when I'm on video, we broke them down into 3 different videos. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. Now, we've got 3 of them today. I'll have 3 more tomorrow, maybe 4, and then we'll make a 3rd video. But number 1 is this. Sometimes people will say, you don't look autistic. The answer to that is, yes, I do. If you have autism, you look autistic. If you have Asperger syndrome, you look like an Aussie. Aspergian, some people say. If you have $1 million or more dollars, somebody says you don't look like a millionaire. Well, actually, you look exactly like a millionaire. Same thing if you got $1 billion. Or what about this? Somebody would come up to an American and say, you don't look like an American. Actually, yes, they do. If you are an American, that's what an American looks like. So we have these stereotypes, I guess, of what a Aspie is supposed to look like. Somebody with autism is supposed to look like. And I don't know what that is. Dustin Hoffman, maybe? We're all supposed to look like that. I guess that would be okay, but, you know, we don't all look alike. And I don't think there actually is any physical apparent characteristics of people with autism that is identifiable. I know some conditions do have, especially facial, distinctive markers, but not autism. As far as I know, that's not there. Okay, the second thing they sometimes say is we're all a little autistic. How do you respond to that? Because, you know, it's kind of true. If you want to identify the traits that qualify one to be autistic, everybody has those traits to some degree. So if you want to spread out the spectrum to include anybody who has even a trace amount of the traits that are identified with Asperger syndrome, then yeah, what they're saying is very true. And in that sense, I would agree with it. Everybody is a little bit autistic. I can't think of any exceptions. Even a newborn baby, we'll talk about that later. If they have autism, then they are autistic. If they don't have autism, then they have, maybe it's not obvious if you're newborn, but those traits are still there. All right. Now, when we talk about autism, or specifically Asperger syndrome, and I know some people who are a little bit bothered by the term Asperger syndrome. It's somebody has imposed upon it negative characteristics, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, not in this video, but in one of the future videos. We're going to talk about that and why it's perfectly okay to use the term Asperger syndrome, or Aspie, or Aspergian, whatever you want to say. Perfectly okay. There's a misunderstanding. We'll talk about that later. Number 2, you know, we're all a little autistic. We're all a little bit on the spectrum. We all have Asperger syndrome to some degree or another. Well, we need to understand that there is a book. Most people who are into this are aware of it. That DSM-5, it's got all the things that a psychiatrist needs to know about, I hate to call them mental disorders because they're not all mental disorders, they're just mental traits the way the people are. Some of them we would classify as disorders, and some people would even call it an illness if it's extreme, but anyhow, the DSM-5 defines these things very specifically. And it lays out in black and white what qualifies one to have Asperger syndrome or to be autistic. They don't use the term Asperger syndrome any longer in the United States. My understanding is in Europe and Australia the term is still in use, but in the United States we don't say that anymore. I think that's kind of dumb, but that's just my opinion. What we say is high functioning, autism. That's Asperger syndrome. So the autism spectrum disorder, we say, is based on 7 characteristics, and let's take a look at these characteristics. And if you have these, or a quantifiable number of them, then you can be, let's call it certified. That sounds good. You can be certified as autistic. The first one is deficits in social, emotional reciprocity. So somebody says hello, and you say, well, it depends. If you have autism, you may say nothing. You may say something strange. You may say something out of the ordinary. I typically say hello. Now, when I was a kid, I had a problem. Oh, I got to say this. Some people on the autism spectrum are actually the opposite, where they are very, very, very overboard verbal. Talk too much, won't shut up. But most of us, we don't talk a lot at all. Anyhow, when I was a kid, people would ask, how are you? And my response was, fine. That's it. I didn't say, I'm fine, how are you? I just said, fine. That was the response, and that's as far as it went. I didn't see any point to say anything else. I didn't want to say anything else. And I felt inhibited because this person was bothering me. And it did bother me when people would speak to me. Very strange. But that's part of being on the spectrum. Second thing is, and there are 7 of these, by the way, deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, such as facial expressions, the way you stand. Most people would term this body language. We have a deficit in that. When I went in for my certificate, that's not what they call it. But when I went into, let's call it appraisal. That sounds good. But when I went in and talked to the therapist for a diagnosis, which is what they call it, one of the things she did was she would try to read things about me. And I didn't even know she was doing this till after it was all done and said, and she gave me the report. But her conclusion was that I didn't have expression. I presented myself in such a way that I had very little expression. I call it a poker face, but that is nonverbal communicative behaviors. Most people will respond to, if somebody's trying to be funny, you kind of smile, laugh, unless you're mad at them, then you don't. But if somebody is very sad, you kind of empathetic toward that behavior, and you'll express that, you will mirror it. And people with Asperger syndrome, with autism, are less likely to do that. Sometimes they don't do it at all because we speak a different language. You're saying something in, say, Russian, and I don't speak Russian. So I'm not going to respond to it. If you say, how are you in Russian, I don't know what you're saying, so I can't respond. It's not quite exactly like that, but that's a good analogy, I think. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. We're going to do a whole video on these 7 things, though. But having friends, a lot of people have a lot of friends. Some people have a few friends, a circle of friends, close friends. When you have Asperger syndrome, you may have 1 or 2 close friends at the most. Typically, people with Asperger syndrome, their close relationships will be their immediate family. I'm talking about your spouse, your kids, maybe your grandkids if you're that old. May expand into your cousins and that broader circle of family, but typically not. That's it. You just don't have friends. And I see people, in my neighborhood, and they have friends coming and going all the time, and I'm okay with that. It's just not me. I don't have friends coming and going all the time. Number 4 is stereotyped or repetitive motor movements. like flapping your hands. I tend to rock back and forth. I see people with Asperger syndrome. They do other things. When I was a kid, I used to walk in circles. Odd behavior, but I was thinking. My mind was working. And while it was working, I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and think, so I got up and moved. The next one is insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns. I can't say that I have that, but obviously that's one of the traits that comes with it. Typically comes with it. Everything has to be the same. The office that I'm sitting here, everything should be the same. If you move anything goes out of order, you go bonkers. Now, if you watch the movie Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman, we're going to talk about that in one of the upcoming videos in the series. But everything had to be exactly in place. Not so with me, but that is very typical of people with Asperger syndrome. The next one is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. That is normally called special interest. Some people use the acronym SI, the shortcut SI for special interest. And some Aspergers, Aspies, Aspergians have more than one. And I've seen some people that will move from one to another, but they always have at least one, sometimes many. And I got to be careful if I'm at somebody's house, relative's house, and engage in conversation, because I will go right to my special interest. They don't want to hear it because they've already heard it. They heard it the last time I was there, and the time before that when we got together, and the time before that we got together. And so I've learned just not talk about it, because it's interesting to me, but it's not interesting to them. And because I'm not really good at picking up on what people are thinking, sometimes I can do that, but sometimes I can't. I don't actually know that I'm driving them crazy. To me, they seem perfectly interested in what I'm saying. So I've learned that's not true. And that, by the way, is why you need to study and research Asperger syndrome, autism, so you can learn what you should do and what you should not do. It just helps you motivate and navigate through life. Then the last one is hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input. Now, most people with Asperger syndrome, they're very familiar with hyperactivity, or hypersensitivity, I should say. I've never met a person with Asperger syndrome who likes fireworks. Now, I'm sure there's got to be some out there, but I've never met one. People with autism don't like noise. They don't like crowds. Just for the fun of it, I posted on Facebook a while back that we were going to have a convention. Who's coming? And everybody said, not me. We don't like that noise, that busyness. That it's not just the social interaction, it's just the racket that's going on. So hyper or hyposensory activity to sensory input. Hyposensitivity, that's something that we don't often think of. I mean, we understand hypersensitivity, but not hyposensitivity. That means that it doesn't bother us when it bothers everyone else. And I think this is most frequently expressed through pain. Some people, most people feel pain if you, poke them with a pin or something, or you twist their arm, when your kid in school gets you in a headlock or whatever, give you a Dutch rub. If you know what that is, those things that kids do when they play with each other, to each other. And it hurts, or it's annoying or whatever, and so we fight back and forth. But to a kid with Asperger syndrome, it doesn't bother him. I mean, it bothers them, but not to the extent that it would the other kids. They're not that sensitive to pain as some people. So those are the things that comprise autism, or the characteristics, the traits that help therapists identify those who have Asperger syndrome or autism. And if these aren't present in your life significantly, and I think probably all of them are to some tiny degree, but if they're not a significant part of your life, then you're not a little autistic. But if you take the broader definition of any trace whatsoever of any of these characteristics, then it's true that everybody's on the spectrum. But I would say in response to that, no, you were not. Just in that one sense. And then number 3, people will say this: have you always had Asperger syndrome, or how did you acquire it? Or they will express it, something like that, some way, somehow. The answer to the question is autism is not acquired. So the answer is yes. If you have autism or Asperger syndrome, you have always had it. It is a condition that, from what I've read, from what I understand, it is a condition, and they're still trying to decide if there's more than one cause. Different things could have the same symptoms. But one of the things that is comorbid with autism is when a baby is born, and probably even prenatal, is their blood has a lack of oxygen. Now, when I was born almost 70 years ago, they knew this. And they had this term called blue baby or blue baby syndrome. And a blue baby was called a blue baby because they were blue. And the reason they were blue is because they lacked sufficient oxygen in their blood. And I was one of those babies. The reason they lacked oxygen in their blood is because they had a hole in their heart, literally a hole in their heart. We could dig deeper into this, but the condition, the blue baby syndrome condition, is called tetralogy of Fallot, or TOF. Now, the word tetralogy basically means study of 4, something like that. So it's a rare combination of 4 congenital heart defects that reduces blood flow to the lungs. Consequently, oxygen-poor blood flows to the little baby's body, resulting in bluish skin tone. And I was told years later that my dad understood. Apparently, he talked to the doctors after my birth, and he understood that I wasn't going to survive because I had a hole in my heart, and just this little baby wasn't going to live. And so he went and had to talk to my mom and say, I'm not going to make it through the night. And I proved him wrong. I'm still here. And I've had heart surgery since, but that was, when I was in, I think I was in my 60s when I had heart surgery. So the problem resolved itself, but that is not the cause of autism, but it's comorbid. And they find that it is fairly common for people with autism, people with Asperger syndrome, to have had that heart condition when they were born. And not very many babies have that. It's really rare, but it's much more common in people with Asperger syndrome. So probably it's not a cause of Asperger's, it's not a cause of autism, but rather it's comorbid. So whatever causes autism apparently also causes that hole in the heart, which results in blue baby syndrome. So they are, again, comorbid. Think of it as siblings that have the same parents or whatever. But it is an indicator, so that's why we bring it up. And the reason we're bringing this whole thing up is because people will say, have you always had Asperger syndrome, or was it because somebody gave you a vaccine? To my knowledge, that's not one of the points, but to my knowledge, people often say that. There is no concrete evidence anywhere ever that a vaccine causes Asperger syndrome. Why do they say that? I think it's because about the time you give a little kid a vaccine is when people first start noticing autism traits. And so some people, they they draw a cause and effect conclusion. Where they happen at the same time, they're concurrent, but one doesn't cause another. And obviously, autism doesn't cause getting a vaccine, so it must be the vaccine causing the autism. That's not true. I mean, if it is true, there's no evidence that I've seen. If you know of any, we have a comment section. You could tell us what you think. And let's take a look at this one paragraph and see what the Journal of Pediatrics had to say about this. Many people born with congenital heart disease, that means at birth, endure neurodevelopmental challenges that persist throughout their lives. A study published in the Journal of Pediatrics confirmed that those born with CHD, congenital heart disease, experienced, you ready for this? A 33% increased likelihood of being diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And the quote says this from Harvard Medical School reports, this holds true even after considering other factors known to elevate the risk of autism, including genetic syndromes, prematurity, and neonatal complications such as epilepsy or insufficient oxygen at birth, which is the blue baby syndrome thing. So those are some of the questions, and we got 7 more to go, so be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the bell so you'll get notifications so you won't miss the next 2 videos on this very topic, the dumb things that people say to people with Asperger syndrome. So you have Asperger syndrome, that is to say you have high-functioning autism, but you also are displaying traits of avoidant personality disorder. So here's the question. Stop and think about this. Who is avoiding whom? Seriously, who is actually avoiding whom? Are you avoiding people? Or are they avoiding you? Could it be that you avoid people because they avoid you? Now, this is something the therapists often miss, and I think the reason is because many therapists, as qualified as they are, as good as they are, have never actually experienced this. So they don't have a point of reference from life's laboratory. That's where we come in. Now, have you ever been in a situation where you walk into a room full of people and you just feel kind of invisible? It's like you're not even there. Everyone just ignores you. They're avoiding you. And your response is, early in life, to try to connect. But somehow you can't do it. And after a while, you just learn this is the way it is. They avoid me, and so I avoid them. Or have you had this experience where you walk into a room full of people and you feel like Moses walking into the Red Sea? Everybody just parts. It's like you have this aura about you that is not good. And people just sense this guy is a problem. She has a space alien aura about her. So we're just going to kind of stay away. Or you walk up and talk to somebody and they give you that look, or they kind of look away, and you can tell they're trying to get away from you. And it's not the way you smell. It's just something about your personality. They're trying to get away from you. So avoidant personality, the point that I'm making is avoidant personality may be rooted not in our inability to connect with others, but the inability of others to connect with us. It's not that we're avoiding them, it's that we are responding to them avoiding you. So we have some points we want to talk about. In fact, we have 9 of them altogether. We want you to listen to these all the way to the end to make sure that you don't miss anything. Number 1. Again, the question is, who is avoiding whom? Number 1 is this: feeling socially inept, inferior, or just unappealing to other people. This occurs when you realize that there is a social acceptance spectrum. That is to say that we have all encountered people who are tremendously charismatic. Now, when you were in school, particularly high school, maybe junior high or middle school, there was a kid or a group of kids who were very popular. And there may have been a kid or a group of kids who were very unpopular, and everybody else was kind of in the middle. So that would be a spectrum from the most popular to the least popular, and maybe you were on that lower end, the totem pole, the lower end of the spectrum. And that hierarchy of who is acceptable and who is not acceptable. And you're on the low bottom part of the hierarchy. So consequently, that gives you a feeling that there is something flawed about you. There's something wrong with you. So what do you do with this? Well, you learn that you are held in contempt just because of who you are, not because of something you've done or said, but just by the virtue of you being you. And so you learn from the way that they treat you to avoid them. Number two is this. Consequently, you may have an inability to socialize. Now, the fact of the matter is, people with Asperger syndrome, not inclusively, not all of us, but many, don't socialize because, well, we just can't socialize. Now, people tend to socialize, as do all animals, basically. We tend to socialize based upon our genetics. We are pre-programmed genetically to socialize with other creatures like ourselves. Now, some people just have a better program. Some people are inherently more capable of socializing than others. So the outcome is this. We feel awkward and sometimes terrified. I can remember many times nobody could see it, but I could feel it. And that was a sense of terror, of really just fear of being around other people. Now, I did a video a few months ago explaining this to people who don't feel it, and I told them, look, do this. If you want to understand how people with Asperger syndrome feel, then get in front of a crowd of people and give a speech. Now, some people can do that. Oddly, I could do that with no problem whatsoever, but many people, it's like they're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. They have this fear come over them. They become extremely self-conscious. They become anxious. They become terrified. I have encountered a few people, not many, but a few people who actually had to run off a stage because they were so terrified of being in front of people. Now imagine feeling those sensations of fear, anxiety, terror every time you're with a group of people. Now imagine this, going every single day of your life, going to school every day of your life, being terrified, just like some people are terrified of public speaking. That is what we're talking about. We have that inability to socialize. It's just not programmed in our brains the way it is, as effectively, I should say, or efficiently, as it is with typical people. Number three is this: avoids occupational activity. So if you're terrified every time you get around people and you become very self-conscious, and you don't know what to say, and if you did know what to say, you wouldn't be able to say it, because when you open your mouth, it comes out strange. What happens is you find yourself incapable of working. It's kind of hard to hold a job when everybody around you thinks you're a space alien, when they think you're a little bit weird, when they hold you in contempt, where you are not the brunt of the joke, but you actually are the joke. It's hard to hold down a job. Doesn't matter how qualified you are, doesn't matter how loyal you are to the company, doesn't matter if you show up on time every time, it doesn't matter if you work very hard and actually know what you're doing. But if you don't fit in socially, if you don't fit socially, it's virtually impossible to hold down a job. The result of that is, or that is the result of, I should say, avoidant personality disorder. But that takes us back to the original question. Is it them avoiding us or them rejecting us? You know, there's two ways of avoidance. One is where you get away from people, and the other is where you push people away from you. So it could be I withdraw, that's avoidance, or it could be I push you away, that's avoidance. Typically in the workplace or in school, it is that second kind, where they push you away. They're the ones with avoidant personality disorder of type. But you learn every time you get around people, they push you away, and anticipating to be pushed away, you know it's going to happen. So you just stay away. It's kind of like touching a hot iron. After you get burned a few times, okay, maybe just one time, you learn very quickly, I'm not going to touch that again. And the same thing is with social circumstances. It happens time and time and time again, and you learn that this hurts. I'm going to stay away from it. So the question is, hang on, are they avoiding me, or am I avoiding them, or is it both? Number 4 is avoidant involvement with, avoids rather involvement with others. So while we experience at work and at school, we experience everywhere with neurotypical people. Missing is not only the emotional support that is necessary to mental health. So what we're saying there is that I think it's just commonly known that there is, for a healthy mental mindset, there needs to be some social interaction. But what if you are denied that? What if, well, think of it in these terms. You need to have vitamin A to have a healthy body. If you don't have vitamin A, eventually you'll lose your eyesight. And think of social interaction as kind of a vitamin for your brain. And if you don't have that vitamin socialization, then your brain doesn't function correctly and you become avoidant. So it's not just work, it's not just school. It seems to be everywhere. Could be in your neighborhood, could be at the grocery store, could be at church, wherever you happen to go, wherever you happen to be. You notice, there you go, you walk in, you're invisible. Or you walk in, you're Moses, Red Sea of people, just parts, they all try to get away from you. Go up to someone, try to have a conversation, and you can tell they're kind of pushing you out of the way. In fact, in some cases, they're just flat out embarrassed to be seen with you because you are a social liability. So that takes us to number 5, which is few or no close friends. So one of the disadvantages of not having close friends and not being able to socialize is you miss out on the benefits of social networking. So for example, and there are a zillion of these examples, but say for example, your car breaks down. You need a good, reliable, dependable mechanic who's not going to take advantage of you, which fortunately I happen to have one of those, but you don't have one. So you ask around to your friends and people at work or people at school or people in your neighborhood, do you know a good mechanic? But you don't have any friends to ask. You don't have a social network to ask. So what you wind up doing is you wind up going on the internet and you go to one of those websites that refers people, and those are questionable at very best because virtually every professional on the planet, okay, in the country, is on that social network trying to get business. And so it's really no different from driving down the street and just randomly picking out a mechanic. But, pick anything. You need somebody to do some home repair, or you need somebody for professional services like a doctor or a dentist, who you're going to ask who is going to refer those people to you. Well, you find that through social networking. But you don't have a social network, and so you are denied that. Number 6 is this: persistence in that self-perception. So we say this is cyclical. By that we mean this: others will avoid you because you have Asperger syndrome, or Asperger syndrome, I like to say. They reject you, they avoid you, and so you avoid them. And so they avoid you. And they say that, well, this guy's aloof. Or this woman is, she's kind of arrogant. She doesn't talk to anybody because nobody will talk to her. So it's cyclical. It just keeps going back and forth. And that causes your self-perception, which sometimes, we're not saying this is inaccurate, Your self-perception may be that people just don't like me, and maybe that's not inaccurate. Maybe people just don't like you. Again, there is a spectrum. On the one end are those who are charismatic, and on the other end are those who are repulsive. And all of us fall in that spectrum somewhere. And we can't all be charismatic. We can't all have it, as they like to say in Hollywood. We don't all have it. And if we don't have it, and if we're on that low end of the hierarchy, seriously, we need to acknowledge that. We need to recognize it, because you can't deal with a problem unless you say, I got a problem, and you recognize that you have the problem. Number 7 is this. You have feelings of inhibition. Have you ever walked into I was going to say a class, but walk into a crowd anywhere, and you just feel withdrawn. You feel inhibited. You don't look up, you look down, you can't look people in the eye. You feel terribly uncomfortable. Again, it's kind of like standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, or to some people, like standing in front of a crowd to give a speech. But that is what you feel. That's inhibition. That's what you feel every time you are around a group of people. What happens is those traits are exasperated by or caused by life experiences. You learn that from the very beginning, or you don't learn to overcome it. Now, I've seen little kids, little toddlers, and they talk to anybody. They will run up to people, or you pass them somewhere, and they say hi. They don't even know you. But there are other little kids, little toddlers, who are terrified of people from the very beginning. They run and hide. They bury their face. Now, people with Asperger syndrome, I don't know which one they are to begin with, but if they are the toddler who can't seem to connect with people, that just stays there. It doesn't change. And so we're like these little toddlers who just can't connect with people. And we try to get out of the shell. We feel like a turtle in a shell. And every time we poke our head out to look around, somebody nips at us. Somebody pokes us back in. So we learn to stay in our shell. The problem is we become very, or I should say the outcome is we become very awkward around other people. And we just can't seem to overcome it. Now, that, by the way, may be the time when you need to consider going to talk to a therapist. All right, number 8 is this: self-evaluation and negative conclusion. Now, by the way, that is not always bad, as we said before. So we understand, okay, we have this problem of avoidance. We have this problem of social connectivity. We just can't do it. Just can't do it. And it's not that we don't connect with them, but they don't connect with us. Well, it's both. And we recognize that. I mean, come on. It's kind of hard to miss it. So we evaluate ourselves and we say there's something wrong with me. And by the way, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can think happy, positive thoughts if you want, but if you're sick and you think, I'm not sick, okay, how are you going to solve the problem? Now, I'm not saying that avoidant personality is a sickness, but we would say it is a disorder, and if you don't recognize you have it, how are you going to solve it? How are you going to solve a problem if you don't admit, I got a problem? Unless you don't think it's a problem, if you're happy to be that way, then be that way. The end objective is to be happy. But we draw these negative conclusions. And sometimes they're accurate. But we say, people don't like me. People avoid me for some reason. I don't know specifically what it is, but I know that it is. And I know it's got something to do with Asperger syndrome. I know it's there. Maybe I should go get some help. Or if you're happy with it, if you're content, that's your call. But we do tend to have negative conclusions. Those can be greatly distorted. Now, if it takes you to the point of depression, specifically serious deep depression, just my opinion, you do what you want, but just my opinion is that is a time you need to talk to somebody who is a professional. That's the time when you get off YouTube and you get on Google and start searching for professionals, therapists who deal with depression, who deal with, and be sure, this is my opinion again, but be sure you seek out somebody who is competent in that specific area. You want someone who specializes in depression, somebody who specializes in autism or Asperger syndrome. Number 9 is this. We avoid taking risk that involves other people, and just like everything else we talked about before, this is deeply rooted in our past experiences, well, okay, our present experiences. We watch as we are taken as fools, not just the brunt of the joke, but we actually are the joke. Seems like we are always pushed aside, sometimes literally. I mean physically, especially kids have this problem. They are physically pushed aside because there's something there that the other kids don't like. They can't put their finger on it, but okay, it's back to the space alien. This kid's just weird. And they don't even know why, but they know that this kid with Asperger syndrome, and they don't know what it is. All they know is he or she is a social liability, and they don't want to be seen with this person. Nor do they want to be seen being nice to this person, because just being nice is a social liability. Other people will think they're weak or something. So we avoid the risk of being pushed. Sometimes it's just avoidance, and sometimes it's physical, pushing you away. When you know the outcome will inevitably be social defeat, it's no longer a risk, it's a likelihood. It's a guarantee. And so the solution is stay away, because if I get close, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to get hurt. I mean, it happened last time, the time before that, the time before that, and the time before that. In fact, most of us with Asperger syndrome can actually make a list of specific times, occurrences, where we were pushed aside, where we went to be with a crowd of people, maybe church, maybe school, maybe the workplace, maybe shopping, wherever people gather, where we were effectively ostracized, and we don't even know why. Well, we do know why now, but we couldn't at the time understand what is different about us. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it on social media. Don't forget, if you would please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you've not done that already. What exactly is it that you are trying to accomplish? What is it that you want to get done? What do you want to do? You may want to get your finances in order, maybe make some more money, you want to lose weight. You want to maybe make better grades. Maybe you're trying to learn a new language, or you're trying to have a more organized life. I don't know. We have all kinds of objectives, all kinds of goals. And one thing we know is this: trying to reach goals with willpower alone almost never succeeds. I can't think of any exception to that. When just by sheer willpower, we got the job done and continue to keep the job done. All right, if willpower isn't working, what is going to work? Because we know there are successful people who reach their goals without using willpower. Well, what are they doing? I mean, highly successful people, you know, they see willpower as little more than an afterthought. But still, they, particularly people, say wealthy people, where did they get their wealth? They didn't inherit it, they got it somehow, and they didn't use willpower. So how did they get that done? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can get things done, reach our goals, become successful without relying solely on willpower. We have 8 words for you to consider. Number 1 is this: impediments. What is an impediment? That is anything that gets in your way. Now, one of the reasons we don't reach our goals is because, quite frankly, we have, and this should be obvious, shouldn't even have to say it, but we have too many impediments. Now, I say it should be obvious, shouldn't have to say it, but the fact of the matter is, if right this moment you went and looked in your cupboard, you would find impediments. Obviously, they should not be there, but there they are. Go in your refrigerator, take a look. What is in your freezer? Got some ice cream? Trying to lose weight. You got ice cream in your freezer. That's an impediment. You got to get rid of it. What about potato chips in your cupboard? Trying to lose weight? You got potato chips? That's an impediment. I know. It's one potato chip. What's it going to hurt? How is a fraction of an ounce potato chip going to put on pounds? They do, and we all know it. So we have to get rid of those impediments, whatever they are. It doesn't matter. Sometimes people are impediments, and you can't get rid of people, obviously, because they're always going to be there. But we can manage how we interact with people. We don't have to spend time talking with people who are very negative or work against our goals. You know those people that always can tell you how it should be done, and how it should be done is not the way you're doing it. Whatever you're doing. They say you're doing it the wrong way. People just, it makes them feel smart, I guess, to tell them that you are wrong all the time. And these are negative, critical people, and they exist, and we all know it. But can't get rid of them totally, but you don't have to dwell upon a conversation with people like that. You can sometimes walk away. I know it's tough. You got those people in your family. You may have those people at work or school, wherever you go, there they are. But focus on people who don't do that. How hard is that? The second word is incentives. All right, you looked in your cupboard, you saw potato chips. That's not an incentive, it's an impediment. You looked in your freezer, you saw ice cream. That's got to go. But what if we're talking about improving our finances, making more money, just having a better financial life? Well, look in your cupboard. Do you have a financial cupboard? Well, you get a credit score. Kind of the same thing, right? So when you looked in your cupboard, you saw potato chips, look at your financial score, your credit score, and what do you see? Well, your incentive is to get rid of a low credit score and replace it. That's your goal. That's your objective. You're seeing that over the horizon, and you're going to go for it. How are you going to do that? How are you going to improve your credit score? Now, I know some things are kind of obvious, like quit spending so much money, quit eating potato chips, quit wasting your money on stuff you don't need. And there are a lot of things that we think we need, but hey, really we don't. But there's another thing, and that is, well, let me just give you this tip. What I do is I pay off my credit cards in full every single week without missing, without fail. Now people say, man, why would you do that? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, you're going to have to pay it anyhow, right? So paying it every single week is not costing you anything. Rather, it's saving you from paying interest. So right off the bat, you're saving money. But what's more is this. You find that when you pay off your credit cards every single week, then you maintain like a zero balance or close to it all the time. That greatly impacts your credit score. Okay, what do I need? This is in the front of your mind, not the back of your mind. What do I need to do to get my credit score higher than what it is right now? And you know that using your credit card is going to hurt your end objectives. And so you start spending less money on stuff you don't need. Now, come on, think about this for a second. What is something that in your life right now that you're paying for that you could do without? Or you could do with something cheaper? Get your mind working. But have these incentives, have these goals. And you don't need willpower to have short-term or even long-term incentives. Something to work toward. Number 3 is this, what we call self-talk. Make it easy to do what needs to be done and make it difficult to do what needs not be done. Now, you have seen those cartoons, no doubt, of somebody who has a devil on their shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder, and that represents those thinking processes that go on in our minds all the time. And the devil is telling you, hey, look, talking about losing weight, the devil says, the little devil on your shoulder says, go ahead and eat a potato chip. I mean, it weighs a fraction of an ounce. How is a fraction of an ounce going to put on pounds? This is what the devil's telling you. And so you eat a potato chip. Tastes good. Think you have another one. And then you think you have another one. And it's that snowflake effect. Next thing you know, you have an avalanche. I mean, how can one snowflake cause an avalanche? How does a potato chip put on pounds? Well, it doesn't, but a lot of them do. And we take that principle and we apply it. This is called self-talk. And all of us have this self-talk going on in our minds all the time. We're always talking to ourselves. We never even stop to consider that we can control what we say to ourselves. Some of us have difficulty controlling what we say to other people. So we surround ourselves with these devils. We surround ourselves with high-calorie, high-carb food. And then we say, willpower will get me through this. Chances are, no, it's not. Because the only way we think we can make those devils disappear is eat them. And then we replace them with more devils. And we say, okay, now this is going to be the week that we're going to make it. That's obvious not working. So we need to improve our self-talk. And one of the ways to do that is don't listen to the devil. Those little devils on our shoulders that says, eat this food, it's not going to hurt. You can do this next month. Listen rather to the angel on your shoulder, not literally, the self-talk. The angel on your shoulder that says, look, there is a rational, good plan to get this done. Let's go that direction. The fourth word is just that, plan. This is where people with Asperger syndrome tend to excel. Spreadsheets, it seems, that were rather made for people with Asperger syndrome. Not long ago, a few months ago, we put a deck on the back of our house. And we didn't just go out there and start swinging hammers and next thing you know, you have a deck. That's obviously not the way it works. So we had to do some planning. First thing we did is we planned the deck. How big do we want it to be? Where do we want it to be? And then second, we made a materials list. And then we went and bought the materials. And then we started swinging hammers, where the guy who built the deck started swinging hammers and sawing boards or whatever. And before you know it, we had a deck. But we had to have a plan, and that applies to virtually anything and everything in your life. Plan. Okay, let's go back to talking about losing weight. I had a friend I was talking to some time ago, and he told me that he was into one of these mail order programs where they will send you food to eat every week to lose weight. And he said, hey man, that worked. I ate the food and I lost weight just like they say in their ads, in their commercials. I thought about that, and I thought, that's a pretty good plan. Except I don't want to do the mail order thing. Why can't I just set up my own plan? I got spreadsheets. I know how to use them. Not that hard. I can say, okay, I'm going to make a plan, and on Monday I'm going to eat this. On Tuesday I'm going to eat this. On Thursday I'm going to eat this. On Friday and so forth. And then I have my shopping list. And I figured out, what are the nutritional values of these foods? And it doesn't take long to do that. It's not hard to do. And the calorie intake. And, within about a year, I lost something like 100 pounds. And I didn't do the mail order thing. I just made my own. I had a plan. Something that you can start right now. And you don't need willpower. You just stick to the plan. It's really not that difficult. Word number 5 is this. Reasonable, and by that we simply mean, you may say, I think I can lose 100 pounds by next Thursday. That's obviously not reasonable. Everybody knows that. Okay, what about a week from Thursday? What about a month from Thursday? No, those things are not reasonable. Okay, I'm going to build these massive biceps next week. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. We got to set goals and have objectives that are reasonable. So what is reasonable for you? 2 pounds a month I think is reasonable. If your doctor lets you do it, 2 pounds a week is reasonable. How many weeks are there in a year? 52. So if you lose 2 pounds a week for a year, you're going to lose 104 pounds. Okay, you lose 2 pounds a month. You lost 24 pounds. But you get the objective. You want to be reasonable with your goals, with your objectives. Number 6 is this. I think this is important. What we need to do is we need to visualize. By that I mean think about a year from now. What is the date? What will the date be? Well, whatever today's date is, it'll be the same a year from now, except the year will change. Now ask yourself this question. What will my weight be a year from now? How will my finances be a year from now? How will my grades have improved a year from now? If I'm learning a foreign language, how far along advanced will I be a year from now? And the way to answer that question is to ask another question, and that is, if I had started a year ago, where would I be right now? How would things be different in my life right now if I had started, made a plan a year ago and just stuck to it? And you see what's happening is you're just eliminating willpower because you got that plan in front of you. There's nothing to it. And you got your cupboards and your refrigerator cleaned out and the right stuff is in there. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next word. But you've got all these things in line. Willpower, I mean, what? You got your plan, you got your food right there. And it tells you what you're going to eat today and when you're going to eat it. There's not a whole lot of willpower trying to resist potato chips when they're not even in your cupboard. You don't have to have willpower not to eat that ice cream because there is no ice cream. You took it out, and now you set on a path for the next year or so. You just stick to it. And by the way, you will find a year from now that it's a lot easier. You think it's easy now without willpower? Yeah, you can do it, but it's going to be a lot easier a year from now. Just simply because you have trained your brain to stick to this pattern. That brings us to word number 7, and that is the word harmonize. Did you know that your brain comes equipped with a personal motivator just for you? It is a neurotransmitter. You've heard of this. It's called dopamine. That is the thing that gives you pleasure when you eat a potato chip and you say, I think I'll eat another one because that made me happy. And I think I'll eat another one. That's why you ate too many potato chips. That's why you ate too much pizza. That's why you had too much ice cream. That's why you gorged yourself on frosted donuts, because you have dopamine. You activated that thing that is in your brain. It's there. It's working. You know it's working because you're using it all the time. The challenge is this, is not to stop using it. It's to stop misusing it. So let's start using our dopamine correctly. How hard is that? To harmonize our thinking with our dopamine, to get it in sync with our plan. Don't let it run amok. You control it. Don't let it control you. You control dopamine. It's just that simple. Food that I eat has got to meet 2 criteria. And again, things like this don't just apply to losing weight, apply to just about anything. But for example, food that I eat has to meet 2 criteria. It has to like me, let's put it that way. That is to say, it has to be good for me. It has to have a nutritional value that helps me reach my end goal, which is to be healthy and not overweight. And number 2 is I have to like it. There's some very healthy foods out there that I'm not going to eat them because they're disgusting. Take liver, for example. Sorry, I tried it, and I know it's one of the healthiest. They say it's one of the healthiest foods in existence. What is the? Just tell me, what is the food that you hate to eat? That is real food, but it just tastes nasty, so you don't eat it. I just cut liver out of my diet because it doesn't fit both criteria. There's plenty of food out there. There's a lot of food out there that tastes good, that is good to me, that is friendly to me and I like it. So it's healthy for me and I think it tastes good. Now, it may not be as good as potato chips and ice cream and donuts, but seriously, do we have to have the tastiest food all the time? No, we don't. That's where controlling dopamine comes into play. And what we find happening is, you say, well, isn't that the same as willpower? No, because once we get our dopamine in line, our pleasure center in line, it motivates us. And it's doing that again. I just said this. It's doing it right now. It's motivating us to eat donuts. It's motivating us to eat potato chips, whatever. Makes us fat. Well, use it to motivate us to eat food that we like that doesn't make us fat. Let's put it in these terms. Maybe this would be little easier to understand, but let's say that you had a really, really, really good friend. And you like to hang out with this guy, this girl, whoever it happens to be, but there is a problem. And that problem is that every time you get with this person, they punch you in the nose. But you really like this person. You know, you're kind of codependent. Even though they're abusive and not kind to you, you still like to be around them. They make you feel good. Those are potato chip people. And the food that we eat is kind of like that friend that we really like, but it abuses us. So, okay, let's go back to ice cream. I really like ice cream. I can't remember the last time I had any, because every time I eat it, it punches me in the nose. Not literally, it literally makes me fat. Same thing. It abuses me physically. And so ice cream is going to be a friend. Well, let me phrase it this way. It's not my friend anymore. Okay, if we're having a special event, family gathering, whatever, I may say hello to my friend, and that's it for the next few months. And it goes no further than that. So that friend, that ice cream friend, those potato chip friends, I just cut them out of my life because I'm tired of them abusing me. And there are plenty of other foods out there. Again, we said this a second ago, that will activate our dopamine center. So why not go with those? Now, number 8, and this may be a little bit surprising, but yeah, I told you this is an important one. So willpower is not a bad thing in and of itself. But willpower is just not the main thing. And when we rely on willpower exclusively, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. And again, it's that thing that we mentioned earlier where we surround ourselves with carbs and sugar. And we surround ourselves with credit cards. And we surround ourselves with desires to buy junk that we really don't need and we don't use that often. And we tell ourselves, oh, I just can't do without this phone plan, where you know good and well there's a cheaper one out there that works perfectly well. Or I just can't do without cable television. Yeah, if you're financially strapped, actually you probably can do without it. What about cigarettes and alcohol? Touching a sore point here, but believe it or not, you can actually do without alcohol. Now, I'm living proof. I'm approaching 70 years old, and I have never in my life even tasted an alcoholic beverage. And so I can tell you, yes, you can survive without it, and so can your liver. So willpower is a good thing. Just don't make it the main thing. Don't make it the central thing. So you plan an exercise routine, for example, and it's based on activities that you like to do. And so the neurotransmitter dopamine kicks in. What exercises do you like to do? Maybe there's not many of them, but there's got to be something, and eating, by the way, is not an exercise, just so you know. But do you like to take walks? Well, take a walk. Like to take a short walk, do a short walk. Do you like to do sit-ups? Some people do. Do sit-ups. Do you like to lift weights? Do that. Find some exercise, and I can't tell you because we're all different, but find some exercise that you like to do and make a plan. You got that meal plan, right? You know what you're going to eat on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Well, just to add a little bit to that meal plan, this time you're going to put down what you're going to do. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What exercise plan you are going to do. And yeah, it's really that simple. You don't need to rely on willpower. There are other things that you can employ where willpower becomes, as we said earlier, a thing, an important thing, but it's just simply not the main thing. The most powerful thing I have ever learned as a person with Asperger syndrome to command respect, I'm going to share with you at the very end of this video. Okay, we've got 7 things that are vitally important. The first one we're going to spend a little bit more time on because it too is vitally important. But you know, people with Asperger syndrome are particularly vulnerable to those who would take advantage of us, and to do that, they have to some degree disrespect us. But once we are aware of what to look out for, and once we are aware of how to defend ourselves, then maybe, well, we're not going to command respect from everybody all the time, because nobody does that. But if we apply these principles, then maybe we can take the edge off of that disrespect to the point where, okay, we find ourselves being more respected. And if we're more respected, then we're more accepted. And if we're more accepted, then we can be more functional and more successful in life. All right, number 1 is this, and this should be kind of obvious, but for some reason to people with Asperger syndromes, the things that are most obvious are often the things we overlook the most. And number 1 is this: command your space. Now, let me explain that by reminding you that there are some critters. There are a lot of animals who, if they're in danger, they will make themselves look bigger to make themselves look more dangerous. Somebody you don't want to mess around with. And there's some other critters out there that will make themselves look bigger to make themselves more attractive. Kind of like the peacock, you know? So what we're talking about is making ourselves bigger to respect our own space so other people respect us. So that number 1, well, we're more attractive, and number 2, it's a little bit intimidating. But we don't want to do this to the point where we are over-intimidating other people. That will have the opposite effect. All right, now, let's stop and think through this for just a moment. How do we apply this? How do we make ourselves bigger? I don't know about you, but I don't have any feathers. I could dress in such a way that, like some tribal people, will put on war paint, and they'll put on, literally put on feathers in their hair to make them look more terrifying. To me, that doesn't look terrifying, but apparently to other tribes, it looks scary. So we could do that, but I don't think that's going to work, you know? You want to put on war paint, go to the grocery store, help yourself. Halloween time, that may work. But I don't think it's going to make you attractive, and I don't think it's going to intimidate anybody, but at least you'll be acceptable. But you just got that one day out of the year. Okay, so how do we make ourselves bigger? How do we claim our space? Now, I recall back, I must have been 12 years old. Maybe 13, I don't know, just that age where you're just about to become a teenager. And one of the things I love to do is go out in the alley behind our house. We lived in an inner city area, and I would shoot baskets. Sometimes other kids would come along and they'd play with you. And I was all alone this day, and one of the neighborhood girls came along. And she wanted to shoot baskets with me, so sure, would shoot. But then she started doing something that I found really bothersome. Now, you may find this hard to believe, but hard to believe that I would find it bothersome. But she got just a little bit aggressive in her flirtiness, and she wanted to touch me and grab me and hold me and kind of playfully wrestle around with me. I mean, not on the ground, but kind of push and all that. And I don't like to be touched. Back then, I know you find it hard to believe, but back then, I didn't want this girl touching me. So I needed to somehow expand my space, to respect my space, to claim my space. And I think punching her in the face wouldn't accomplish much, probably get me in trouble, and that thought didn't even occur to me. Pushing her away, she probably would think I was playing with her and she'd push me back. But what popped in my mind was this. I held up my hand and I showed her my wrist, and I said, do you see this? Do you see this pink on my wrist? And she kind of looked at it, and I told her, well, that's poison ivy, and don't touch me because you'll catch poison ivy. So what I was doing is I was respecting my space and trying to make it look to her advantage to respect my space. Now, I got to admit, I was lying. I didn't. People with Asperger's are almost painfully honest, but not always. And this is one of those exceptions. I didn't have poison ivy. In fact, my arm wasn't even pink. I just said that. And apparently she saw something she thought was pink, or she believed me. And so she backed off. I commanded my space. No problem. There are other ways you can command your space or respect your space, so others will respect your space, and that is just being a little bit animated. And again, this comes very unnatural to people with Asperger syndrome because we tend to have that flat effect. We have that poker face, but that's also true of our entire bodies. We don't give tells. We're just we have not just flat effect with our face, but we have flat effect with our body language. And so making hand gestures and pointing and rocking back and forth and maybe pacing a little bit, that just doesn't come natural to us. I mean, the closest we get is stimming. You know, I rock all the time, especially if I'm in a place like a restaurant or whatever. I just sit there and rock. And I think it drives my wife nuts, but, it makes me feel good. But we need to do that. I mean, if rocking is something that kind of claims your space or whatever, you need to do that. I recall one time I was at an airport. I hate airports. If I were rich, I would own my own jet airplane. And I love to fly. I just don't like the process of getting on the airplane or being in the airplane with a crowd of people. The flying itself, I think, is fun. But I was standing in line at an airport, and apparently I was standing, unbeknownst to me, too close to the woman in front of me, a young woman, probably in her late teens, early 20s. And she was wearing a backpack, and I wasn't, I wasn't even thinking about it. But what she did to back me off is she just started turning back and forth like this, where her backpack kind of pushed into me. So I got the message, and I backed off. But what she was doing is she was respecting her space, and she wanted me to do the same thing, and it worked. But one thing I love to do besides fly is I love public speaking. I was going to say I love to give speeches, but that sounds kind of corny. I love public speaking. And something happens that's very different for me when I'm public speaking is I'm not inhibited at all. Now, when I'm around small groups of people in the crowd, when I'm in the crowd, I feel very inhibited, put them together, you make a new word. I feel very inhibited, and I want to get out of there. It's kind of like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon if you have a fear of heights. I don't like to be in people, but in front of people, I'm perfectly okay. Now, explain that. I don't know, maybe I'm role-playing, but I've always felt comfortable and actually enjoy public speaking. And one of the things I do when I'm public speaking, and I did this even in speech class when I was in high school, is I own the space, I own the platform. I would pace back and forth, and I found that if you do that, pace back and forth, it burns up that nervous energy. And I would use hand gestures, not obnoxiously, but when appropriate, and I would lean in and do some other things and use facial expressions, and that worked. Now, when you're in a one-on-one situation, you don't want to go that extreme, Do you? I don't. Pace back and forth and flail your hands around. Probably not a good idea, but own your space. That's the principle that should be learned from public speaking. It's when you're talking to an individual, this is my space, I'm going to own it. If I want to raise my arms or twist back and forth or take a step backward or forward or whatever, what I'm doing is I am signaling to the individual that this is my space, I respect it, and I expect you to respect it, but you do it in such a way that you're not bullying the person, you're not intimidating the person, you're just sending a signal that they pick up on. And who knows, maybe they will do the same thing and they will probably respect you for it. All right, that takes us to number 2. Now, these next 6 points we're not going to spend a lot of time on, so pay close attention because we're going to talk kind of fast. But number 2 is this: focus on first impressions. When you're making a first impression, and that's anytime anybody encounters you for the first time, you've got one chance to make that first impression. Now, this was difficult for me to apply, but I found it worked once I learned how to do this. And there was a speaker in our college that suggested this. And he said, when you're walking anywhere for any reason, try to make eye contact with a person who is approaching you or somebody you happen to be passing. I don't like to make eye contact with anybody for any reason. Maybe that's why I like public speaking. You don't have to look them in the eye. But, okay, I tried it, and I did it by making a game out of it to see who would make eye contact first. Now, here's how you get out of it, because you don't want to keep that eye contact. That's just weird, you know? But he went on and he said this: as soon as the other person returns eye contact, speak. Say, hi, how you doing? Nod to them, do something, wave. How are you? And what happens when you do that? You are making a positive first impression that says, I am not afraid. I respect myself. Does this always work? Yeah, most of the time it does, but not all the time. I shouldn't say that, but most of the time. Now, I told you we're going fast. So number 3 is this: beware of shark bumps. Maybe we should go over these one at a time in future videos. If you think so, leave a comment in the comments section. Shark bump. Okay, that needs some explaining, right? All right, a shark bump is this. They say that when, and I learned this from a criminologist, by the way, but they say when a shark is eyeballing a prey, that what they will do first, before they eat the prey or attack the prey, they will bump into it to see what kind of resistance that potential prey is going to give them. The criminologist said that criminals will do the same thing. Before they pull a gun on you, before they try to rob you, before they tackle you or whatever a criminal does, they will, not literally, but they will bump into you. For example, they may say something like, hey man, you got a light? That's a shark bump. Trying to see what kind of person you are, how you are reacting. So throughout all of life, I have noticed that other people are constantly giving shark bumps. Now, they're not criminals. Obviously, they're not sharks, but what they're doing is they are subconsciously, or maybe even unconsciously, checking you out. And they don't even know they're doing it. But you need to be aware of that. The people are constantly being sharks. And maybe it's not because they see you as prey. Maybe they just want to see if you're worth respecting. And so they bump into you. Very subconscious, very subliminal. But they bump into you like a shark. See what you're made of. See what you're like. See what your personality is. Getting just a tiny little bit of feedback. So be aware of those. And when you are aware that people are doing that, when you're out and about, just kind of acknowledge it. And in so doing, believe it or not, you are commanding a little bit more respect. Are these helping you any? If they are, let me know which one is helping you the most. Okay. Number 4 is this. Number 4 is speak to the period. Again, that probably requires a little bit of explanation. But if you have ever had a conversation with another person, I'm guessing you have had that experience multiple times. You may not like it, but you've had it. And as you're speaking to this person, the other person will abruptly interrupt you because they don't respect you. What do? Well, you are in the middle of a sentence and this other person rudely interrupted you. Well, what you need to do is finish your sentence. Be aware that people do that, and when they do, don't stop talking. They're the ones being rude, and you keep talking is not being obnoxious. You're just respecting your space. You are respecting yourself, and you are saying subliminally that you are expecting them to respect what you have to say. Now, there are very few exceptions to this rule. I know when I ran for governor about 20 years ago and did a lot of interviews. And some of the interviewers, just their style of interviewing, they would ask a question, you'd get out about 10 words and they'd ask another question. Well, I could have finished it, but I understood this is how some interviewers like to do it, so I would let them get away with it. Outside of that, I can't think of too many other exceptions. Number 4, again, is speak to the period. Finish your sentence. Number 5, okay, this one again, going to need some explanation, is be square. Hear what I'm saying. I did not say be a square. I said be square. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's kind of related to what we talked about at the very outset of respecting your space so other people will respect it. But one of the ways to do this is when you're talking to somebody, square yourself up to them. Face to face, eyes to eyes, chin to chin, shoulders to shoulders. Don't stand sideways. If you're sitting, if you can, stand up because the person standing commands the conversation in most cases. Make sure that you are facing the individual. Kind of hard to do when you're sitting at a table and the person next to you wants to talk to you. That's virtually impossible. But general rule is square yourself. Be square. Number 6 is this. Speak first. That does not require much of an explanation. We kind of touched on that earlier. That when you're talking to somebody or when you're being addressed, make it a point to face them with perfect alignment, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder, and then be the first to speak. Now, what if you're not in conversation already? What if you're just passing the person and we talked about this a little bit before, but say hi? Or what if you're in a group of people or maybe you're sitting on a subway? Do you take a subway? I don't. There's none even around here, but I used to take a bus when I was a teenager and you sit next to people and nobody would talk. You're in a room with strangers, nobody talks. You're in a restaurant, in a line in a restaurant, nobody talks. Say you're in a shopping mall, if they even exist anymore, I don't go to them, or Walmart. You see a person, just practice. You know, they don't know you, they're never going to see you again. So what do you got to lose? Be the first to speak. How you doing? They may think you're a little weird, but go ahead and try it. Again, you know, they don't know you. You'll never see them again. It's not going to hurt. So when you're out in life, just living your life, think of that as a laboratory. My life and my thinking is a laboratory. I call it life's laboratory. I am nearly 70 years old, and all these things that I am teaching you, I have learned from life's laboratory. There was one point that I learned in college, but all this other stuff I just learned from observing. from life's laboratory. So think of yourself in a laboratory, wherever you happen to be. Try out a few things. Don't be over-aggressive, because if you do, that could have bad consequences. But you can try a little. You can try looking people in the eye and then say hello. You can be the first to speak when you encounter other individuals. All right, number 7. This is the single most important thing that I have ever done that almost every time commands respect. And it's really a very simple, easy thing to do. When you are talking to another person, remember we said shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye, chin to chin, face to face, toe to toe. What you do, are you ready for this? Is you just step in, just a little bit. Now, nobody wants that person who gets in their face and talks to them. That can be annoying. But everybody has this sense of personal space. And what you want to do is kind of guess, because you don't know for sure, there's no line drawn. But you have to guess where that other person's space is. And for most of us, we can tell because we know where our space is. So I know where the line is, subconsciously, I guess. I mean, again, it's invisible. But I know what's too close for me, so I will go right to that line, wherever it happens to be, and go over just a little bit. And in so doing, you're getting into that person's space. And I have never seen this to fail, because that throws them off guard. I was going to say it makes them a little uncomfortable, and it does, but it throws them off guard. It says that you're in command, you're in control, you're not taking any guff, best word I can use, off of them. But you don't want to, again, you don't want to literally get in the guy's face or the girl's face, because that's too much. Then they become defensive, or they become offended. That's not the objective. The objective here is just to communicate, hey, respect me. I respect you, you respect me, and by stepping in just a little bit, I find that that works. Really works. Okay, so you're someplace where you need to talk to a customer service rep, and you're wanting to make sure you get what you want without yelling at the person. Step in. Okay, you may need to lean in if you're at a counter, but just get a little bit closer than what they think is comfortable. Make them, just throw them off just a tiny bit, make them a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm telling you, that's number 7. That is the single most effective thing that I have ever done. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. We will see you next time, and in the meantime, we have a lot of videos. A lot of good information. A couple of them are displayed on the screen right now. So in the meantime, till we see you next presentation, take a look at some of those. The problem that many people with Asperger syndrome have is they don't realize that they're having fun. They see Asperger syndrome as a drudgery, as an albatross around their neck, something that just kind of drags them down. It's a ball and chain. Hey, that's the wrong way to see this thing. Because in my life, and I've been an Aspie all my life. I mean, before I was born, I had Asperger syndrome. I didn't know it, but I had it. And so I've lived with this thing my entire life. I'm almost 70 years old. So wherever you are in life, you could be a kid, you could be a teenager, maybe middle-aged, old person like me, but wherever you are in life, I've been there. I've done that. Maybe not the exact thing, but whatever stage you are in life, I've been at that stage. So I'm speaking from experience. I call life a laboratory. So I am wanting today to show you how I'm having fun being an Aspergian, and how you can have fun being an Aspie too, if you're not already having fun. And if you're being one of those people that feels, oh, I wish I didn't have this, or maybe you're saying, this is such a burden, I got to tell you, folks, look, you're looking at this thing wrong. I mean, totally wrong. It's fun being an Aspie. Okay, we got 4 things we want to talk about. So this is going to be a relatively short video, but let me begin by saying that you create in your mind a neurochemical that makes you have fun. You decide. You decide whether or not you're going to have fun or not, with a few exceptions, obviously. But you decide, if you're at the dentist, is that fun? Probably not. Sometimes it is, but you decide whether or not you're going to have fun by creating a neurochemical in your brain. It's called dopamine. Yeah, you've heard of that before, dopamine. So whenever, ever you are having fun, it's because dopamine is being released in your brain. And it's being manufactured in your brain and released. So we need to stop and ask ourselves, okay, I enjoyed that meal because dopamine was being released in my brain. Well, I had fun playing a game, and it's because, well, I decided to play the game, and in so doing, I was releasing dopamine. Now, what's more is you're not just releasing dopamine, but you are actually manufacturing it. That's a decision you make. I'm going to do something that is fun. And when you make that decision, you are manufacturing the neurochemical dopamine that gives you pleasure. You don't have to take drugs. What's wrong with people doing that? I mean, prescription drugs, sure, but people take these drugs off the street. Oh, I'm having fun now because I popped a pill. You don't have to pop a pill. You don't have to hurt yourself. By the way, here's the way that system works. It's created in your brain first by taking an amino acid, triosine, and it changes it into dopa, and then it changes that into dopamine. All right, now what triggers this? What triggers it is when you decide, I'm going to do something that gives me pleasure. I'm going to do something, and we don't think in these terms, that we're literally saying, not literally, but figuratively saying, that we're going to make some dopamine, and we're going to enjoy ourselves when we decide to do something that has fun. Ever had a milkshake and you liked it? That was because you decided to have a milkshake. Well, in a sense, what you did is you decided that you're going to manufacture some dopamine. Well, do the same thing throughout all of your life, specifically as an Aspergian, as an Aspie. By the way, very quickly, I got to tell you this. There's a lot of things that dopamine does for you and helps you besides just having fun, besides just giving you pleasure. For example, it helps you in learning. It helps you with motivation, with your heart rate, with blood vessel function, kidney function. I could go on and on. There's a whole list of things that dopamine helps. So it's a healthy thing for you to do as long as you don't have fun all the time. I mean, yeah, you could have too much of water. You could have too much air. You could have too much dopamine. But for most of us, that's really not a problem. Okay, we got 4 things really quickly. And as always, I save the best to the very last. So you're going to want to watch this video to the very, very, very end so you don't miss anything. Number 1 is this. To manufacture dopamine, the best thing to do is to create an end goal. We've talked about this in other videos, but let's say you live in Michigan or Wisconsin, way up north somewhere, maybe even Canada, and you decide, I'm going to take a trip to Canada, or to Florida, rather. And you get in your car and just take off. I don't know anybody that does that, unless you just think it's fun to, sometimes people just like to drive. They don't want to have a direction. Well, that in itself is fun, but most of the time what we'll do is we'll get out a map. Okay, I'm showing my age. We'll get out GPS, or we'll go to Google Maps and we'll look. Okay, it's going to take so many miles, so many hours, so much drive time. I got to set up some smaller goals to get to Florida. All right, that's step number 2. So we create step goals, okay, to get from, say, Michigan to Florida. I think maybe I'll stop in Nashville overnight, then maybe I'll stop in Jacksonville, and then I'll go on down to the beach, wherever you happen to be going. Do the same thing in life. Set up goals, establish the end game. What is that you are trying to accomplish? And then set up those step goals. How you get from point A to point B is, well, you got to get to those step goals first. And every time you do, guess what? you've succeeded. And every time you success, you feel good. And when you feel good, you're having fun. You are creating dopamine. So throughout life, what we're doing is we're setting up goals and step goals. Number one and number two. And just in doing that, just in accomplishing those goals, we are manufacturing, we are creating dopamine, we are controlling our own minds. I love it. I love it. Hey, I'm in control of my mind. This is my mind. Nobody else is in charge of it except me. There's some exceptions, like when you get pulled over for a traffic ticket on your way to Nashville. But yeah, you're having fun. You're in control of your life, and you decided you're going to have fun. So if you have Asperger syndrome and you are not having fun, maybe it's because you're not trying to have fun. Oh, that hurts. Maybe it's because you're not even trying to create dopamine. Maybe you didn't know that you could do this, but yes, you can. All right, again, you have a milkshake. You enjoy that. That creates dopamine. You're in control of your mind. Again, apply that principle throughout your life. Now, as you're doing this, say, for example, well, what I like to do, and I talked about this in another video, but say when I'm out and about, maybe in a grocery store or taking a walk, inevitably you're going to encounter strangers. Now, people with Asperger syndrome do not like to make eye contact, but I make a game out of it. I have fun doing it. Just turns everything on its head. So what I do is when I pass a stranger, and I don't do this every time, all the time, but when I pass a stranger, I will intentionally not just try to make eye contact, but I try to be the first to make eye contact. Why? Because it's a game. I make a game out of it. I'm having fun. And when I do that, I win. You know, if I make eye contact first, if I look at them and then they look at me, I scored a point. And guess what else I do? I say hello, hey, how you doing? Or something like that. Or maybe good morning, whatever. Or if they're German, I say good morning, you know, but say something. And when I do that, when I speak before they speak, I scored another point. I'm having fun. I'm having a blast. I go through life having fun. You know, driving down the street, you ever try to be polite to somebody and let them in or let them out or whatever the case is, scored a point. I'm having fun. I make life fun. The way you do that is you work out a ongoing point system. And every time you do something that gives you pleasure, like making eye contact, yeah, eye contact, seriously. I know Asperger's syndrome people find this difficult to believe, but you can have fun making eye contact if you control your brain. If you decide, I'm going to have fun doing this. If, well, phrase it this way, make it a game. Make it a game. Throughout all of life, you're playing a game. Not that you're not taking it seriously, because there are some serious games out there, like professional basketball. They pay those guys, some of them, millions of dollars. Okay, you're not going to make millions of dollars, I don't think, doing this, but you're going to reward yourself with, I don't want to say dopamine hits, that doesn't sound good, but, you know, by releasing dopamine. So you are rewarding yourself, but we'll talk about that. Well, let's talk about it now. This is point number 4 is pay yourself. Now, dopamine release, having fun, is payment in and of itself. But there are other things you can do to pay yourself. For example, I like to go out to eat at a favorite restaurant, and I get a whole list of them. And of course, I take my wife along, you know. So we go out to a favorite restaurant, and that is my reward. I get to have some good food that I enjoy. I get to spend some time with my wife, which I enjoy. I am rewarding myself. No, I do not sit in front of my computer all day long making videos. I do other stuff. And at least once a week, I reward myself and my wife. We go out to eat. Okay, now what if, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Ken, I'm on this diet, you know, I can't reward myself going out to eat. But yeah, you can do other things. You don't have to go out to eat. But what is it that gives you pleasure? What I would suggest you do, and you're good at this because you have Asperger syndrome, what I suggest you do is make a list of things that give you pleasure, but don't hurt you, don't harm you. Again, if you were trying to lose weight, I suggest you don't reward yourself with a chocolate milkshake. Find something else that gives you pleasure. Maybe spend a couple hours watching a movie on the computer or on your television. Remember those back in the old days? We had these things called televisions. But yeah, reward yourself somehow, some way with something that releases dopamine. Now, the reason you're doing that is because every time your brain takes, I call it a potato chip hit, you eat one potato chip, you want to eat another one because eating that first one released dopamine. You created dopamine. You're controlling your brain. So you eat another one because you like that. You like having fun. You like enjoying potato chips. Well, that was fun eating the second one, so I'll think I'll eat a third one. Next thing you know, the whole bag is gone. But we can do that same thing throughout all of life. Something that is fun. And you do it again, and you do it again, because it released dopamine and you liked it. So make everything you do in life, find out a way to make it likable, to make it enjoyable, to make it fun. And when you do that, you want to do it again and again and again and again. It's a great way just to learn. All right, number 3 is pay yourself. Number 4, well, let's go back. Ready? Number 1 is create an end goal. Number 2 is create step goals. Number 3 is to pay yourself. And number 4 is journaling. Hey, just keep track of it. Yeah, you're an Aspie. You know already all about journaling. Asperger syndrome is what I call spreadsheet syndrome. You know what I'm talking about. If you're an Aspie, you know very good and well what I'm talking about. So just, write down your goals and then write down your accomplishments at the end of every day, maybe the end of every week. If you are weightlifting, maybe once a week might be too much, but once a month, keep track of your measurements. If you're trying to lose weight, maybe once a day or once a week, get on the scale. If you're trying to up your game when it comes to social contact, hey, I looked 5 people in the eye today. I spoke to 5 people today. Journal it. Write it down. What are your thoughts? Think of the things that, and this is an assignment for you right now that you can do as soon as this video ends. Get out your spreadsheet. I know all of you have one. Get out your spreadsheet and make a list of things that trigger dopamine. Things that you find fun. And if you can't think of any, you're not trying. I guarantee you, some point in time in your life, you've had fun. I mean, seriously, you got in your whole life, never had fun doing anything? I don't believe you. Make a list on your spreadsheet, or you could use WordPad if you want, whatever, but make a list of things that you find enjoyable, that you have fun. Okay, that is your motivation list. So every time you accomplish a goal, made eye contact, spoke with somebody, actually got out of the house and did something, write it down. Why? Because that triggers more dopamine. Now you see what's happening here. You're creating a dopamine chain one after the other. And you're reminding yourself when you journal, when you take notes. And it's okay if you trip up, make a mistake, something doesn't work, you can make a note of that so that you can go back and fix it later. Now this is just one of a lot of videos. On the screen you will see links to other videos. We got lots of them, and these are fresh as the day we made them. I only make videos that can be applied day after day, month after month, year after year. So we have other videos that are as fresh as this one. You watch them anytime you want to.